now we're at where the action starts about, where we're putting anatomical landmarks. But look, the landmarks are already here, and because they were placed when we did the original design. So it would have to be a really significant change. Really, the new impression was, 3 millimeters shifted one way or the other, that you would notice anything odd about these. But if it had done that, right, I always take a gander at these. And if you want to move these at this point, you can. But normally, if they're not, abnormal, I'm going to move forward, because this is the area that you typically would have to adjust. Again, depending on how changed the data is, because remember, this stone model was created from a wash impression in your original design. The line that you're looking at here is your original border that you drew in the original design. So, quite often, if I'm going to print a prototype denture for try-in from a dentist who had put the intraoral wand in the mouth and scanned soft tissue, which you guys, if you've ever heard me speak, I don't advocate that. It's just too difficult, too challenging. But, 1 out of 10, docs will try it. And so we start with intraoral scan. In almost every single one of those cases that I've done, that all my friends have done, when you start with an intraoral scan and you print a prototype denture, you 99% of the time are going to have to do a wash impression in it. It's just not going to fit like our reference dentures or wash impression dentures fit because of the mucocompressions. When somebody sends me an intraoral scan for a denture and I make a prototype, I typically leave the border short because I want to leave room for that wash impression to capture those borders, that heavy body we put around the border. So when I get to this step, if this wasn't a case from an intraoral scan, but if it was, then those borders would be very, very short and I would have to extend them. So this one, you can see I need to come out a little bit with it because obviously the first scan, whatever it was, right, did not capture the data all the way out here. So I'm going to extend these out. I'm going to check, make sure we're back in the palatal seal area good. You just want to check the border carefully. Sometimes it'll be a little bit further out than it needs to be because of the previous impressions. So this is really, the first thing that you really have to look at modifying. And, it's not typically a big modification. So just a few minor changes there, and we're good to go forward to the tooth setting screen. We'll go through blockout, of course, and you guys know we've been through this, right? I next through this unless it's a really severe undercut. All right. So what's going to happen now is it's going to get our original setup, get that invalid option occasionally, and can't get a good answer from 3Shape. What I do is this clears it out every time so far. Yep, back one screen and came up one screen, and that cleared that out. I'm going to get an answer what that is or why it is, but if the teeth are gray and you get that invalid option, just go back a step. So that's my original setup, right? And the first thing I noticed, I mentioned to you earlier, let me turn off the plane, is that the left side had an open bite, right? And so, when the dentist modified this try-in and then took the bite, they didn't take it with a bite registration. So they basically held the prototype and the lower denture in their hand and scanned the bite in their hand. And what it turned out was that this just tilted up on them and they didn't see it. It's one of the reasons I recommend to dentists all the time that, look, when you're taking a bite registration, even if it's in the same space, it's a good idea to squirt some bite material in between the teeth to help hold them together for the scan. So, this would be a call, right? I got this case in front of me and I'm looking at that and I'm saying that can't be right. So I'm picking up the phone, calling the doc, say, hey, was it open on the left side? And is that the way you want the final? And clearly, 99% of the time, I don't think 99,000% of the time, I don't think anybody said, no, I meant for it to be open. So they just missed the bite. And, a couple options here. I'll show you how I'm going to handle it here in a second. But, I could say, well, look, I need a new bite. You still got the dentures, the patient gone. And that all depends on what's there. And okay, in this case, the patient had already left. They were wearing the prototype. So, they did the wash, impression, the modifications, scanned all that, cleaned all that up, and gave the patient the denture back, and out the door they went. So I've got this data, and it put my original setup into that new arrangement, but that new arrangement wasn't 100% accurate. It's right on the other side, right? Um, you can see that if I take it away, right, you can see the grounding there, but still open over there a little bit. So what I've got to do now is I've got to figure out how am I going to get these teeth in the right spot. Now, normally the left side's going to be an occlusion. I'm not going to worry about that. What I'm typically looking at is what has been changed, right? What's different? And really in this one, the only thing's different is the intaglio, which has already been taken care of by 3Shape. And the only other thing here is on this right side. But as you can see, 3Shape's kind of already taken care of that too. You can see that it set those teeth to the new bite and occlusion with that lower. That's the way the other side should look, but it's not. So I'm going to have to deal with that. And I'll show you how to do that. It's actually really not hard. One of the most other common things that we see is that you'll see a black line marked with a Sharpie if the midline's off, right? If the dentist says the midline's off and I drew you a line, then I would see that line right here. And if I can see that line, then I would know where to move the teeth to, correct my setup to that midline. And that is typically the movements that I make, right? Midline, and then how much tooth is showing. That's the second most common thing, right? And so what I would want my dentist to do, and again, the second case would do, you'll see it, is a cervical line, right? Show me where the cervical line of the teeth and the gingival margin of the denture base should be. And so if it's, if the teeth should be dropped down a little bit, then obviously there'll be a line incisally of the gingival margin as it sits here. And I'd see that, and I just move the teeth to it. But in this case, what's really off here is that occlusion on the right side. The midline was good. The right side, 3Shape took care of, but I'm going to try to save the impression here